let me be really direct. Did Donald Trump win the Colorado vote in 2020? Oh, it's that time of year again when people want you to vote for them. Why? Why? All right, so there's 4 seats in Colorado's government that are statewide seats. The governor, yeah, attorney general, secretary of state, and treasurer. Pam Anderson wants to be the secretary of state.
Hi, John.
Hi, good to see you again. What a lousy job.
No, it's the best job.
Why is it the best job?
It's the job I grew up in for the last 20 years. I was a municipal clerk, City of Wheat Ridge, one of 3 elected municipal clerks in Colorado.
Really?
Yeah. And
who are the other 2?
One was Hayden, and I can't remember the third. I'm not sure if it's still elected in Wheat Ridge, where I still live, with my husband Jay, where we raised our kids, go Farmers. And then I served 2 terms as the Jefferson County Clerk and Recorder.
All right, so Clerk and Recorder, Secretary of State, one does it for a county, another one does it for the whole state.
Correct.
It being, let me see if I got this pretty well close, it keeping all your records straight. Who bought that house? Who owes the note on the house? When it got sold? Who's married? Who's not married? Are you incorporated? Are you not incorporated? And if I remember, the Secretary of State is the one that really does corporations and articles of incorporation and bylaws and all that other stuff. You need a library of well, we need the facts, just the facts. Who owns this building? And you go to a clerk and recorder. Who owns this company? You go to the Secretary of State.
Right.
But you also have to run elections.
You do.
Which means, I never thought county clerk or Secretary of State would be as hot a position as it is post-Trump election.
Yeah, who knew? I mean, usually you have to say, what does the Secretary of State do? And you're right, for Secretary of State, it's business licensing, you regulate bingos and nonprofits and charities, and then you're the chief election official. The county clerk, actually, as the Jefferson County Clerk and Recorder, had a bigger operation, large county. We also did motor vehicles title and licensing, so tax collection, and high volume customer service, and land records, and marriage, and elections. Elections has been, my favorite side, but
really, why?
I think it's a wonderful combination of human nature and democracy, and how all of that intersects. Technology, project plan implementation. It's essentially a big accounting project. So we do auditing, and then you overlay politics, and it is fascinating.
Is there a basic conflict of interest in that you've got this elected position that's in charge of certifying the winners of elections? And the Secretary of State's office, not just in Colorado, but nationwide, has become much more political. The California Secretary of State letting out names of donors to not-for-profit organizations against the law. You see that it's become, and I never thought it could ever become an activist position. I'm going to go back to those 4 positions. Yeah, your governor, that is an activist, policy-driven thing. The attorney general, all right, he gets to decide who to sue and who not to sue and who to prosecute and who not to prosecute. Basically, the state's attorney. The other 2 seem really boring, or should be really boring. The treasurer says, we owe interest on these bonds, we have to pay them. That seems pretty straightforward. And we got to keep the record straight in a way that people can understand and count the votes.
Right. Yeah, it is the key reason I'm running. I really do think it's more of a professional position. I'm a federally certified election official. I'm a state certified election official. There's a lot to know about this work. I've been elected, before, once as a nonpartisan elected official for elections, and twice as a Republican Jefferson County Clerk and Recorder, but it really should be a politically restrictive position. You talk about policy on the impacts for elections and what you do for the office, or enhancing commerce, but it shouldn't be a polarizing political position. I like the fact it's elected.
Because you got a job to do, or a task. It kind of reminds me a bit of the guy who does the autopsies, a coroner. That can be an elected position, But you know what your job is to tell me how this guy died. That is your job. You have one job.
Well, you need to be the fair referee, and it's why I decided to run, because of this very disturbing trend we've seen. Now, it's been going for a little while. You know, Bush v. Gore, remember
right.
Katherine Harris. I think...
Katherine Harris, who had the famous line, when in doubt, follow the law.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what we've had in Colorado traditionally has been politically principled people, but they make sure that that office remains above the fray. And I want to return back to that type of...
You just think that we're not there now. Explain why.
We're not there now. In 2018, we had a lot of turnover, both at the local level for our county clerks and in the Secretary of State's race. Jenna Griswold, a Democrat, defeated Wayne Williams, a Republican, in what was a very big blue wave year.
Let me just put some numbers to this. So how big of a wave? Wayne Williams was a remarkably popular Secretary of State. I think a remarkably competent Secretary of State. And he was endorsed by every single newspaper in the state, sans one, the alternative weekly in Boulder, the Boulder Weekly.
Right.
All right, so Jenna had one freak newspaper go, oh, let's go the other way. You know, I've never seen such massive endorsements, and he also did a great campaign. There was no major screw-ups. There was nothing. You know, he was a shoo-in in any year except 2018, which was a backlash year, and Democrats won it all 4 of those positions, and the State House and the State Senate. Yeah,
I mean, for the first time, we saw these types of trend waves reaching down a little further down on the ballot, including to county positions. Right. Matt Crane in Arapahoe County lost his race, a very competent professional election official. And so I started seeing this disturbing trend of candidates.
Is it disturbing just because Democrats won? There's nothing disturbing about that.
What's disturbing?
What are you, a racist?
What I think is most disturbing is people that are interested in these races more as a political stepping stone, more than for the work that it is, representing Colorado.
And you believe Jenna Griswold is using this as a stepping stone?
Well, she declared an exploratory committee to run for U.S. Senate within weeks of getting elected. So yes, I do believe that that's the case. And I think that there's a real difference between Jenna Griswold and myself and our approach and our philosophy, our responsibility as representatives for all Coloradans, how hyperpartisan rhetoric plays in her strategy and her communications. And I think that throws fuel on the fire of mistrust for an office that should have a fair referee for the political process. I want to get into
Griswold a little later, but you just said hyperpartisan. Let's talk hyperpartisan. You just survived a primary where a lot of people didn't think you were gonna win this. You had 2 folks who were Trump election deniers, including Tina Peters, who made it a pretty big deal. Why were those people a bad fit for the Secretary of State's office?
Well, I think what we've learned is these races shouldn't be political. I think we've learned a hard lesson that for folks that want to take their political views and overlay it into the people of Colorado in offices that should be a trusted referee, they're rejecting that. And I had a lot of confidence in the voters. I know that Coloradans are very independent, and they want somebody that's a professional with experience and not somebody that's just using it as a stepping stone.
All right. I'm going to keep pushing on this one. Tina Peters is alleged to have broken a lot of laws by taking data. What she's trying to do, if I understand the situation, perhaps I don't, she's trying to prove that there was funny business in the 2020 election. Isn't that a laudable thing for a county clerk to do? That her job is to show, no, these things have been tampered with. Here's how they've been tampered with. Isn't that within her role and the scope of her work?
As a county clerk for 8 years, it was certainly in my role. I have a legal obligation to contest an election that I have evidence and doubts about. But there's a legal process to do that. What Tina Peters is alleged to be doing is violating the law by breaking the chain of custody and breaking the security protocols.
Custody of
election records and from system records. And it wasn't necessary. That's what's kind of the shame of the whole thing. You can take that through the legal process if you have evidence of it. Now, I want to be clear, we have seen no evidence of it. We have paper ballots and audits. They did a full hand count in 2021 of the Mesa County ballots. And so this conspiracy that she believed was impacting the outcome of elections has not had any evidence of proof. The issue that we're faced with is if you turn off your security cameras and you allegedly steal the identity of one of your constituents and give it to somebody else to access these systems, that's breaking the law. So if you want to contest and challenge election, you need to do it within the rule of law.
Would it be possible to prove, I'm nibbling around this idea, is it possible to prove malfeasance in an election that way? In other words, is this the only way she could have said, listen, I'm going to pull out this information, I'm going to show it to this other person. Is that the only way you do it? You say there's legal channels, but do those legal channels actually work?
They do actually work. We've seen contests of elections, successful ones. In North Carolina, for example, there was a contested election, and they actually had to redo a complete congressional race. When you take the oath of office as a county clerk or as a secretary of state, you have an obligation, not just to the people and the rule of law and the oath that you take, but we have transparency built into our elections. So we have bipartisan election judges. We have a public audit board. We have a public canvassing board with all of the interested parties in it. All of those legal mechanisms are in place to identify any issues. If there are some security issues or technical issues that a county clerk doesn't understand, you absolutely have the right to bring experts in.
Are Colorado elections clean, fair, and accurate?
Yes. Colorado elections are clean, fair, and accurate. And what's better is that they're independently verifiable. So I worked very hard as a county clerk and as a leader for the Clerks Association to ensure that we have paper ballots for every voter. We have public scrutiny. And that I was never in a position to say, trust me, I'm your government. Well, right? we need to have that independent scrutiny.
How can it be clean and fair when we're throwing out ballots like grocery store coupons in the mail? But we do. I mean, you can go into any condo mailroom or apartment mailroom, and they're just there in trash cans to be harvested. And an election judge looking at a signature, and looking at another signature, it's not identification. It's not, here's my ID, I'm here in person, let me vote. These ballots can be harvested in two ways. One, illegally, by taking people's ballots and dropping them off. And also legally they can be done by having harvesters come and knock on your door of people they know are going to vote your way. And by the way, I believe the left has this down. Mind you, again, it's just legal. You knock on the doors, we go, our data shows you're going to vote our way. Have you voted yet? Do you need a stamp? Do you need a stamp? Do you need a pen? Do you need a pen? I can help you with that. I can help you with that. And they take it and they batch them up and they bring them down to your office and drop them off. Both of those, the illegal one, you cannot catch, and maybe you catch a lot of them by this signature, but there's really no way to prove that.
Actually, I disagree, and there is, because, John, I had the same questions you did when I became an election official, right? Absentee balloting was growing in massive numbers in my county. We had permanent mail voting. We were at 82%.
By the way, I only think males should vote, so I agree with you on that.
Yeah. And it was very, very popular. And so I had the same questions you did. And we were talking off air. My husband and I are business owners, manufacturing. And I wanted to say, hey, is this security that we have for mail ballot and validating a voter, whether it's in person or the mail ballot that comes back to the judges for evaluation, is secure and accurate? So I developed the first signature verification audit, where every election that we conducted, we sampled so that I could have confidence that judges were well trained. Does the training work? Are they identifying that? And then, we do reject ballots. We're on average between 0.5% and 1%, depending on the type of election. And they're
reject them on what grounds?
On signature verification, meaning that the voter that voted it, we cannot verify that they were the person eligible to vote it. So
1% of the time, 0.5% to 1%, you kick out a vote because the signature doesn't look right.
Correct.
Which has got to lead me to believe a lot of the time they slip by as well.
Well, our audits that we did not indicate that at all. Did not. And what I'm saying is trust but verify, like Ronald Reagan said. And that we need to have those processes in place to make sure that it's easy to access your constitutional right, but that we're validating that it's accurate and fair.
What happened to those 1% that you kicked out?
They're retained for 25 months. They're just set aside. We also send a letter and an email or text, depending on how voters like to be contacted, and gives them an opportunity to cure the situation with a copy of an ID and an affidavit. And so they have 8 days until after election, up to 8 days after election day to validate
So
that.
you kick out because I broke my hand and I can't sign it the right way, or I changed my signature because it's a whole new me.
Right.
And you kick it out and you contact me and go, we couldn't verify that this was you. How often do people go, well, that's because it wasn't me, I didn't vote?
Again, ultimately, it's about 0.5 or 1% that we never have cured. And we believe that some of them are, I cared the first time, but results hit and my vote may not make a difference, so I don't care enough to cure the ballot. But some are rejected for integrity reasons. So some of the most common examples, spouses.
Spouse. This is why you need a divorce. If you had a divorce, we wouldn't have any election fraud.
I am wild about my husband, Jay.
No, I doubt that.
I am. So spouses, right, signing. And I can tell you an interesting story about that. One of my very good friends called me because in Jefferson County, we process the ballots. Rejected ballots are rejected. You have an opportunity to cure. And any ballot that is not cured gets investigated. And cases are sent to the district attorney, and my district attorney and I had a joint project on that, and would follow up on every single one of those. Most of it is an intentional fraud, right? Spousal. Oh, I didn't realize, right? And they'll say, I'm so sorry.
Didn't realize.
Right, didn't realize.
Fraudry, put her in jail.
Well, intent matters in our state. And so what our district attorney and I would send a letter and say, hey, records indicate this is what you said. Don't ever do it again. I tracked recidivism. Guess how much it was? 0. 0, because it's...
They just got better at forging.
It's education.
You just don't...
No, sir.
No.
Disagree.
No, forgery.
No. Another instance, like you said, is people whose signatures deteriorate over time.
Yeah.
Another higher rejection rate arena are younger voters whose signature hasn't really landed, right, with their identity. And so it's good that we have an opportunity to cure.
I still dislike mail-in ballots.
I know.
For other reasons. Even if you convince me that they were accurate.
Could it be about residency, John?
It could certainly be about residency. That somebody gets a mail ballot here, but they don't live here. You got students who can do same-day voter registration, and so people who are good at playing that game are really good at that. And that's why college towns are ripe, I think, for getting same-day voter registration. Come on in, let's save the environment, and you bus in these kids who are registered back home, but they can also register here legally. There's also voter intimidation. In that, I think in nursing homes and other places, there are people there to help you vote. There are spouses who might look over your shoulder. If you're in an abusive relationship, your spouse can't follow you into the ballot box. You are free to do what you want in a regular election. On a mail ballot, you don't have that.
They actually can follow you into the ballot box. Under Colorado law, anyone can assist any voter.
It's a little easier.
I'm just saying.
Right. But the point...
Can I address a few of those? Okay, so nursing homes. We actually have bipartisan teams with healthcare facilities. Of any healthcare facility does I think 8 ballots or more that don't have independent mail service. In other words, they have a centralized mailbox, like, in the lobby or what have you. Bipartisan teams actually go with essentially a mobile vote center. And they take the ballots and they deliver the ballots and they stay there and assist them if they need it, and take the ballots back. So we have some protections against some of those things. Now, college students, I agree with you, right? The residency question. It's why I worked as a county clerk and as the Colorado representative on a database that does cross-state matching for registration and voting to ensure that we have cleaner lists, one. a person can register to vote in more than one place, but only one primary residence is eligible. You can get 2 ballots in Colorado if you own property, like a special district property owner ballot, right?
But also,
residency is a little bit squishy.
There are cities in Colorado that have more people registered to vote than actually live in the town. We've heard these stories, and some of it makes sense because people die. Some people move away, but it tells me that the voter rolls don't get cleaned up as quickly as they should.
Well, we've found over the last 10 years it's gotten a lot better, and that's because of this organization where states, the Secretary of State level, join and we share data and do cross-state matching. Kansas had a version of this before Secretary Kobach had a version of this, but this is one that when we started, it was 8 member states, Colorado being one of them, where we would do cross-state matching and we would check, whether or not people had moved or if they had died out of state, for example. Now that's 31 states. So I agree with you. It can get better.
Before we run out, we're going to run out of time before we know it. Let me be really direct. Did Donald Trump win the Colorado vote in 2020?
He did not.
How certain are you of that?
I have seen no evidence and no public board or certification of an election.
I know people who say mathematically just can't happen, and they will go to their dying breath believing that he won in Colorado.
Well, I have a report for you and your listeners. Lost but not stolen. So Ben Ginsburg, he litigated Bush v. Gore, if you remember. Ted Olson, a very prominent constitutional attorney, 4 other attorneys wrote a report where they examined, particularly in these swing states, both the litigation and any evidence for the election. And that is essentially mirrors what we've seen here in Colorado, that we have seen no evidence. And I'm an evidence-driven person, and we've built our system to be based on that. And it's a citizen election. We have your neighbors and friends being the election judges, the appointed boards examining all of this, and we've seen no evidence of it.
Are you convinced that Donald Trump lost the election nationwide?
I am.
Because?
I recommend this report. It pretty much, brings together the summary of both the litigation.
Not watched 2,000 Mules?
I have watched 2,000 Mules. And it is a very scary movie, and it's very concerning. And you mentioned ballot collection before. I think that in Colorado, it's legal to collect up to 10 ballots, any individual for an election.
Up to 10?
Up to 10. And, I'm not sure all states have the security and validation of the voter that we do. We've been able to evolve this.
I think it's important, let me jump in here real fast for time's sake, that our mail-in ballots didn't happen overnight.
Correct.
It grew over years, first with absentee and then permanent absentee and and it evolved, and I think that's why it's much more secure. I look at places like Pennsylvania when out of nowhere on this COVID election, they throwing out, it was ripe for abuse. I cannot imagine that there wasn't all sorts of games being played in these states.
It was the most highly scrutinized election. Actually, the Republican House of Representatives brought me out as an expert in 2021 to talk about ways that they can improve things in Pennsylvania. But that election was very closely scrutinized and litigated, both by the Republicans and the Democrats. And no evidence that any issues that would make an impact on the result. Voter fraud exists, John. You're absolutely, we reject ballots every single election.
So 2,000 Mules did not convince you?
2,000 Mules convinced me that there may have been problems with ballot collection, but they did not indicate any evidence that there were illegal ballots counted. And that's an important distinction.
All right. We only have a couple minutes left. Let's get to Jenna. All right. So you're trying to unseat an activist Secretary of State, and there's no question that she's an activist.
Right.
She put out an ad with your predecessor, or who you hope to be your predecessor, Wayne Williams. I can't help but feel that Wayne got duped on this one.
Yeah, I actually called for that ad to be taken down immediately for 2 reasons. One,
and this was an ad where both former Secretary of State, current Secretary of State are there telling us we have good, clean elections.
Yeah.
That seems like a nice message.
I agree with the message, actually. It's not the message. It's the messengers using taxpayer money for 2 declared candidates showing their image on a commercial. I think that's electioneering. Wayne's running for mayor. Jenna's running for Secretary of State. That's not an appropriate use. As a matter of fact, I think that there's an opportunity cost for that $1.1 million that Jenna used for securing our elections and our registration system for what that money was really intended to do.
What was that money intended for? She used $1.1 million from where?
Federal funds, Help America Vote Act funds. And these were funds passed, there was a 2002 bill, Help America Vote Act, to purchase and secure accessible voting systems and accessible ADA-compliant polling centers and our registration database to secure and improve that and modernize that. It's allowable to do education on security. You just can't say, go out and vote. You can't get out the vote with them. But the last thing Jenna said was something like, go out and vote. And so I think, there's two issues there. One, is it electioneering? I think it's true. If when I become secretary, you won't see my image as a declared candidate sending a really important message. You'll see, if you want to air ads in Broncos games, like we saw a few of them in that preseason game, Shannon Sharpe, John Elway would be a much better well-known spokesperson for that message that I think would be more effective. It is an appropriate role for the secretary, not when you're a candidate.
Why is Jenna unfit to be Secretary of State?
So we have people of good conscience with lots of questions about our elections, like you have as well. We need a fair referee that's not going to put their thumb on the scale or throw fuel on the fire of election concerns through hyper-partisan rhetoric.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, she invites special interest in some of the most polarizing issues of our time, like abortion, into her office to write her press releases. She testifies on the bill in the legislature this last spring on the abortion issue. And there was an initiative petition circulating this summer on that. It will come to the office as an access point for the ballot. You disqualify yourself.
She is going to be, and I put things on the ballot, I do initiatives, and they come forward, and part of the process is I got to bring it to the Secretary of State's office, and it has to be processed in order for me to go out and get signatures, et cetera. Has to go to the title board, which she has a representative on. And so she's there saying, I'm part of this, and I'm also going to oversee its election.
Right. And I think it questions her ability to be fair. I think it creates doubt. If something is rejected, is it because it was a fair process, or is it because of her political position? The regulatory environment around the initiative and petition process and around candidates and campaign finance. I think there's evidence that she's used that process, that regulatory process, to create some power to penalize more forcefully her political enemies rather than...
Give me an example of that.
Well, for example, unaffiliated candidates. Unaffiliated candidates have access points through petitions. There were campaign finance complaints filed on unaffiliated candidates periodically. Wayne Williams, when he was secretary, dismissed some for not having enough merit. She refiled. There were 12 cases. She refiled against 5, only the unaffiliated candidates. And it was reported by the Durango Herald. It said, hey, that seems odd. When asked about it, she's like, oh, he told me to refile, which was patently false. And I think you saw a pattern of this. Who do you send to the administrative law judge when they come back? Who is she tripling fines for? I think there's a perception, and a real perception, that she's putting the thumb on her scale in order to penalize her perceived political enemies.
I'll also add that I've known people who needed to do mergers and get to the Secretary of State's office to do the paperwork and can't get through.
Yeah, periodically we had government shutdowns during COVID. She closed her office for over 2 years to all but remote access. At the same time, I led the county clerks and worked with them diligently as critical infrastructure to both the economy and to elections in 2020. And I was on the road supporting them and getting them up and running within weeks, within a very short amount of time, because the elections are critical infrastructure. And they've been closed, and she prohibited her staff from traveling to support elections.
What do you think your chances are?
I think we have an awesome chance this year.
Not only you have to say that. Every politician says that.
I've been out there, and people doubted that in the primary as well. And I always had the confidence in the voters.
Do you believe you would have won the primary if we had a closed primary system?
I'm not sure. I think it did open up the primary to a more representative group. of the nomination.
Yeah. And I have real mixed feelings on this as well, that the Republican Party, of Democratic, these are private institutions, and unaffiliated should stay out. Go affiliate if you want to have a say in a private organization. So I've got a problem with it. At the same time, I don't know if you would have won or if Joe O'Dea would have won, and I don't believe that Tina Peters or I'm already forgetting.
Mike O'Donnell.
Pardon me?
Mike O'Donnell.
Not your opponent, but I was thinking about Joe O'Dea's opponent. I'm blanking out on his name already.
Ron Hanks.
Alzheimer's is fun. Ron Hanks.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would have been able to win in the fall, and I think you stand a very good chance. I think Joe O'Dea stands a very good chance. And also I think the forces that were in place 4 years ago have completely flipped around, and that with high inflation, high crime, the Secretary of State's office often gets caught up in the sentiment of what goes on nationwide. And
yeah, I do think that the Secretary of State's office, as we discussed with 2018, tends to be a trend office, right? It's a down ballot race for a more professionalized position, in my opinion. But so it may be subject to those trends. But I do think the issues that we have and the moment in time we are regarding threats to democracy have elevated this race to a heightened awareness for Coloradans and the importance of it, both with my opponent Jena Griswold and Tina Peters, who are a little bit flip sides of the same coin, right? Around their partisan political positioning and using that office for those beliefs. I think people see how important it is. They did in the primary, and I think they will again in the general.
I just want a Secretary of State does the damn job.
I have a colleague in Maricopa County who ran in 2020, and his campaign slogan was "Make the office boring again." And I think normal sounds nice.
Normal sounds nice. Bam, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Best of luck.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.